As I mentioned earlier, the Queen's body has been moved from Balmoral Castle in Scotland to the Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh, where the coffin will remain in the throne room for fewer than 24 hours. It's heading towards midday over there now. In about 2.5 hours, the Queen's coffin will then be moved by procession to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. King Charles will, earlier in the day in London, give his reply to the parliamentary condolences inside the 900-year-old Westminster Hall, which is not only the oldest building in the Parliament, but the only part of the ancient Palace of Westminster, which is the seat of the British Parliament, which survives in almost its original form. The King and his Queen Consort will then fly to Edinburgh to inspect the Guard of Honour at the Palace of Holyrood, and then the King and members of the royal family will participate in a procession in approximately 3 hours' time to move the Queen's coffin from the throne room at Holyrood House, as it's called, to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Charles and Camilla will follow the coffin on foot. When the coffin arrives at St Giles, the Crown of Scotland will be placed on its top, and it'll be guarded by vigils from the Royal Company of Archers, allowing Scots to pay their respects. The King and Queen Consort will then head back to Holyrood, where the new monarch will have an audience with Scotland's First Minister, the hard-to-stomach, that's my words, Nicola Sturgeon. The Scottish Parliament will be sitting. King Charles will receive a motion of condolence from members of the Scottish Parliament and give his reply. At approximately 7:30 Monday night their time, 4:30 tomorrow morning our time, the King and Queen will hold a vigil back at St Giles with other members of the royal family. Now, King Charles is 73, Queen Camilla is 75. Charles, the oldest person to accede to the throne in British history. At the pace he's been setting, he is bound to be exhausted. It's more than interesting to note, though, some of the factors that contributed to the easy charm of Queen Elizabeth. I'm indebted to some excellent writing by Tony Wright, the associate editor and special writer for The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, who reminds us that always close to the Queen was at least one of her 5 ladies in waiting. We've all seen people thrusting bouquets of flowers in the Queen's direction. She accepts them all. She would carefully then palm them off to one of the ladies in waiting, who would then swiftly make it handed off to the chain of other anonymous helpers, sometimes the police, the last of whom would pack the flowers in one of the following cars, and they'd be distributed usually to hospitals. The Queen was reported to have owned over 200 handbags. They never carried money or a mobile phone. There were, I presume, fashion statements, but they had other uses. As Tony Wright reminds us, whenever you met the Queen, the handbag was draped over her left arm. If she switched it to her right arm, the staff knew what she was signalling that she was signalling to be rescued, most probably tired of the conversation. If she was sitting down, the handbag was on the floor. If she moved it to the table, she was bored, and a lady in waiting would immediately come to extricate her from the unwanted conversation, discreetly, of course. If she then wanted what we would call a get-me-out-of-here moment, she'd twist her wedding ring, and the staff knew that the boredom was about to end. It is extraordinary to reflect that the Queen visited Australia 16 times between 1954, when she was 27, and 2011, when she was 85. And remember, we're a long way away from London. It was when the Queen and Prince Philip returned to Australia in 1963 that the then Prime Minister Robert Menzies quoted the words of a love poem, "There is a lady sweet and kind," by the 17th century composer Thomas Ford. "I did but see her passing by, and yet I love her till I die," unquote. The young Queen was more than slightly embarrassed. The next verse was not quoted by Prime Minister Menzies, which talked about what it might next become if only, quote, "I had her fast betwixt mine arms," unquote. Thankfully, Prime Minister Menzies didn't go that far.